am Samantha Hugh. I am the founder and director of a company called ADHD Girls, and I have a dual mission to empower girls and women with ADHD to thrive in society and to improve society's understanding of neurodiversity. And I identify predominantly as a storyteller and a scientist, having worked in 16 work sectors that began from the age of 16 and carried on after my PhD as well in science, where I further explored other careers outside of science. And yeah, here I am today, at the age of 41, by creating a company that is based on my own diagnosis of ADHD later in life.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot to discuss in a short space of time. Should we start with your particular area of expertise, like what you did your PhD in?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I did my PhD in cancer research. From the age of 15, I was really obsessed about, stories of people surviving cancer and, the families, lives that are intertwined, and the reassessment of your life priorities after you recover from cancer. It's like a second chance. And, for me at the time, I just thought, that is such a meaningful thing to put my energy into and my career into. And that began almost like a decade, over a decade long obsession to study cancer research. So I come from Malaysia, where I didn't really have the means to fund myself to study abroad. So I had to work really hard, which is a bit of a paradox considering that I have ADHD, and it was so difficult anyway to really focus. And at one point I nearly failed, all my papers, and my teachers were wondering what was wrong with me. And I couldn't understand, I couldn't explain it. But then, I talked about having a charismatic adult in your life who really kind of, just tell you the things that you need to hear. And this changed the course of my life, and this person happened to be my biology teacher. It was perfect. And she encouraged me. And, coming from an Asian background, education was so important. And everyone, put such emphasis on, education and getting a really good job and getting the respect in your society, so that was all. I thought my life path was, I'm going to become a scientist and I'm going to cure cancer. And, I'm going to be happy. So I got a scholarship from the Prime Minister to come to the UK to do my postgraduate. And that's when everything just kind of unraveled. And I didn't really manage to stay on course with my master's and my PhD, although, I did graduate, but it was a really tough journey, because once I got to the UK, there were so many things to deal with that were new, so many things that, even the student life for someone who's been so sheltered her whole life is such a revelation. And I only got to this stage at the age of 24. And so very later on, I wanted to make up for lost time, all the times that I spent studying so hard in Malaysia. When I came to the UK, I wanted to experience life, just know what it's like to truly live. And that I did. And even though, I was still interested in my PhD, I was working on two different types of research for cancer. One of it was to look into childhood leukemia, and another was to look into cervical cancer in women. And the reason there were two very distinct and different topic areas was because I had a lot of issues with my supervisor at the time, who took a liking to me in more ways than I can imagine. And so, yeah, that began a very difficult time, and eventually ended up with me filing a sexual harassment, case against him, which I kind of won, and he got fired. And because of that, I had to think about a different, subject to cover, to finish my PhD. And people at the time were saying to me, halfway through my PhD, imagine 2.5 years into it, and they say, why don't you just not do it and just give up, just leave? And it's just unthinkable, when you get to that stage and just thought being an Asian as well, so much rest on that, you finishing what you do, because hard work is so important above all else. And yeah, so from then on, I just kind of went into crisis mode and, worked really hard, despite not really knowing how to do it. And I didn't really have a very encouraging new supervisor. And I just had to find my own way. And it was really incredibly difficult time, which I actually never talked about publicly until now, because I think I am ready. And so in the end, I pulled through, I proved everyone wrong. But then that kind of just, like it was the peak of just me having enough of this whole career in science, despite wanting to do so much. I learned that there's so much consistency that involved in creating the reproducible experiments time and time again within research. And if you can't produce consistent results, then you can't trust your own results, right? And the papers that you publish require you to produce these results at least 3 or 5 times in order to say that that's real. And, even though that I managed to do it within my PhD, but I just thought, I don't have it in me. And now I know that having the ADHD brain and, not being able to be consistent. In fact, I thrive on being inconsistent, plus the political scene within science that frankly was dominated by males, on top. And it just wasn't family friendly. I couldn't imagine having the life that I have now as a mom and, being able to choose my hours and still work out how to go into the lab to feed my cells. And so there were so many things that just didn't, align with what I thought my life would work out to be if I took that path as a cancer research scientist. So I finished my PhD at the age of 30. Imagine being at the age of 30 when, like, you look at everyone, you think, I should be able to be like, up here now with my career, as a director somewhere. But then I had to start again. That's when at the age of 30, I decided, right, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to write about healthcare. I'm going to write about anything. So that's when I started exploring various different sectors, from travel writing, healthcare writing, impact writing, commercial modeling, presenting as well. And just anything. I started a soft furnishing business. So there was just, I was lost for a really long time. And I think that's the existential anxiety that I talked about in a panel that I was on recently, that I didn't know what to do with myself. And with that comes like a period of depression as well, that kind of takes over between every transition, between the jobs that I would try and see if that would be what I, wanted to do. And frankly, yes, that lasted for so long. I had children, one child, and then didn't really dare to have another child because that would take another, however long that it takes to grow your child until you feel safe enough to leave them. So that's me really. I mean, the last 10 years. And then I founded a company, and now I just feel like I'm in the right place. I'm putting together all the experiences that I had, and these experiences were valuable and people resonated with them because they're not built on perfectionism. They were built on a lot of the failures that I've had and, the trouble of always feeling like an outsider. So, that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. I mean, Samantha, first of all, there's just so much in what you've just described. And it's really interesting to kind of listen to how things unfolded and developed. And I'm wondering how much of that is because you're in a minority. I wonder how much of your story was a consequence of, being born and raised in Malaysia. Big shout out to Malaysians, by the way. I'm half Malaysian.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
So put it there. And yeah, like just kind of really relating to this idea of education being first and foremost. That was also in my family, that education was the top priority, and education was the gateway to making something of your life, being a valid citizen, you know, and so there's so much in what you've just described that we probably, you know, could spend hours chatting about. And first of all, thank you for being so honest about your story, because it's not easy to recount some of the experiences you've been through. But it's really beautiful to hear that, you know, the result is this company that you founded, and you're bringing together all your experiences, good and bad, to do something that you feel is aligned with your purpose.
Yeah, definitely.
So on that note then, can we just define what ADHD is, first of all, so we all are on the same page?
Sure. Yeah. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is what they have named this neurodiverse experience, and it's a misnomer, and they have named it in a way that so many people who are late diagnosed do not identify with it, and that's one of the reasons why we're late diagnosed. So the predominant traits that you get with ADHD is that you're hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, and this, if you were to refer to your idea, what you know and what most people know from how media has perpetuated this stigma, is that you see this naughty white boy, you know, in the class, very disruptive, you know, like just can't stop jumping around and disturbing everyone, and like just really chatty. But the reality is that in women, it looks very different, you know, and especially when you bring in a cultural and a racial perspective into it. And that's because, as you know, in our society, it is so important to respect the elders and to do as you're told. Asian children, certainly when I grew up, were seen but not heard. You know, you don't interrupt when your elders are talking, and you respect your teachers because they have such a pinnacle, you know, in society. And so, yeah, that is one of the reasons why so many women with ADHD flew under the radar. From 2019 to 2021, there was a 3,200% increase in women coming to look for a diagnosis in ADHD, and that is causing a massive bottleneck in diagnosis and referral within the UK. And so ADHD, in a nutshell, people want to change the name from attention deficit to, like, there is a new proposal for a name called variable attention stimulus trait. So in a sense that you have more than enough attention, right? It's just that you may not be able to focus on one thing at any one time, because they've shown that the mind wandering part of the brain, the seat of your imagination and creativity, you know, causes your persistent pull away from what you're focusing, what you're doing when the task doesn't interest you. And that's why girls with ADHD, even though they might be distracted, they might do it quietly. They might look out the window. They might not just, you know, listen to the teacher because they're finding other things to stimulate their brain. You know, so that's ADHD, and why I suppose someone like me, who was born in an Asian culture, never really even hear or even know about ADHD enough. You know, was only diagnosed when I read about it in my late 30s.
I mean, I wouldn't want to sort of project my own stuff onto you, but when I hear you describing your experiences, I really relate to your story because of being an unrepresented woman of color in a very male-dominated world. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to project my stuff onto you, but
please do.
It's just
about sharing.
You know, I'm relating to your story because I just feel like so much of my lost years, because I also, you know, I did my PhD as well, and it was kind of, you know, it was trying to tick that box of like education, like just get that done, because then the parents and the cultural expectations will be met. But, after I finished my doctorate, I spent a lot of time trying to find my way, like, in the same way that it sounds like you did, experimenting with a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and like, oh, I'm not so good at this, or that doesn't suit me so well. And eventually finding our way. I mean, both of our stories is like, we're now doing what we really want to do. And how have you experienced finding your purpose? I mean, what does it feel like to find your way?
Gosh, it is amazing, especially when it took so long. I like all these different explorations, the different things that you're doing, trying to see if it fits or if it lights you up. And maybe it did at the time, but it didn't do it long enough, right, to sustain. But when you find something that truly lights you up and you feel like you're being given the permission to thrive, and you have a voice all of a sudden, that thing that you're talking about how you finish your PhD and you ticked a box, that wasn't like just accidental. So many women in our culture feel like that. And I had to Google it recently because I heard on a podcast that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is different for the Asian culture. And I didn't know that before, because I was looking at that and I'm thinking, that's not really me. How we need to feel safe, we need to feel belong, and then, we can go on to fulfill our potential. But the Asian's hierarchy of needs is very much like around, feeling safe, providing for your family, but also affiliation instead of belonging. And then to achieve the top part of the tier is actually about status and respect, and that is so important in an Asian culture. And I suppose that's why many people would rather be in the, really good job, although they might slowly, the soul might be eroding inside, but it was enough just to have that respect and that status, I'm sure you feel, or you've encountered the same, so like our parents would tell us, so-and-so's, son is working in Microsoft, so-and-so's son is in a banker, engineer, like yourself, and scientist is okay, but doctor, like, it's just like, wow, these guys have made it, right? Are they happy? We don't know, but if their parents are happy, if they're being talked about as being respected, then maybe that was enough. For a lot of people.
I mean, this is such an important subject and it never gets talked about, which is because I must say, even just hearing you speak and your accent does transport me to my mum's side of the family, who's Malaysian. And I can already feel, I can hear their voices of like, no, but you should be doing this. And look at the daughter of that friend. And, that relative is, as you say, has become a doctor and went to Oxford and Cambridge. And even at my age, I still get moments where people ask me, oh, so what did you study? And then I proudly say mechanical engineering. And then I tell them that I did my doctorate. And then they say, which university? And I went to Brunel, which is obviously not like the top whatever in the world. And I get this pang of like, oh my gosh, what I did wasn't good enough. And it haunts me today that there are so many labels and so many sort of like accomplishments that are world renowned. And if you don't fulfill those, then you're kind of less than. So I guess basically there's this constant feeling of being less than. And a lot of my lost years, or my years of being lost, was fighting against that sense of like, oh, I'm a disappointment. And I don't know whether you found this, but it's like I got to a point where I actually just accepted myself for who I am, and it coincided with finding the work that I love to do. Do you experience that?
Yeah, I think I had to find my way from being very far away from those voices that tell me, to stick to what society expected of you, and I don't know why, but at the time when I was choosing a university to go to, I chose the one furthest away from home. And like to this day, I think my parents only visited me once. And maybe I did that unknowingly because I knew that I wanted to look for a life for myself. But of course, it's only possible to see that in hindsight. At the time, it definitely felt like completely anxiety provoking and everything else that came with it. So yeah, what was your question again? I know I was getting there. And your question was around.
Well, I think you've answered it in the sense that I wanted to know whether you experienced finding your purpose, but you just said something that was so fascinating. It was like finding yourself, and needing to be detached from where you came from in order to find yourself, or actually even create yourself. I just wanted to expand on that, because let's just say now you've created a good sense of who you are and what you want to do. How have you found people's reaction to it? Because, we've had our parents' reaction, our cultural reactions and everything, but you're living in a very different culture. So now that you've found yourself, how is it being where you are, in terms of how people are receiving what you're doing?
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because since I founded this company, I haven't been back home, but I've talked to my parents. Basically I've chosen to do something that is really stigmatized in the Asian culture, and can you imagine like being the director of a company, like and openly talk about your ADHD, and in the Asian culture, it's pretty much a mental illness, right? And they don't know enough about it. It's in the same line as, when your brain isn't right. But that is why I want to change things. Even within this scene, I set up this company within the UK, and being probably the only Asian woman in the UK to head up a company helping women with ADHD. And most of the people who come to my workshop are Caucasian women, and I try to, put the word out that actually I offer bursary to my workshops, because I want to help as many people as possible. But I feel like it's not reaching because they don't feel safe to go where they're not represented. So because of that, I'm starting an intersectionality campaign, because I've seen that the people who shape the narratives in the room within neurodiversity, the ones who influence the media and public perception of neurodiversity, don't really have enough representation. And so I'm dealing with a lot, by doing this, and actually openly talking about my culture and my beginning is something that I've made such a conscious effort to hide for so many years. Because why do you want to stick out to be different? But then you come to a point to realize that your difference is your power, and your difference is really the thing that is going to help you own it in life. Because all the things that you grapple with yourself, it was for a reason that you got to this point in creating your own place like you have. You created your own place despite what your parents, your upbringing, your culture has told you. You made your own place and you're great at it. Whether it's Brunel or UCL or Harvard, they were lucky to have you, right? Why do we have to associate ourselves with this label or like a name or an institution, when you are bigger than that? And I'm all about creating your own doors, because believe it or not, I didn't actually manage to do any of the thing I'm doing without doing that first, because the doors were not open to me. In fact, they were guarded by people who have been in the field for decades, and they're very skeptical of those who come, new and trying to, create something different and fresh.
Oh my God, this conversation is so important. And it's just not had. People don't speak this way. And I feel so privileged that we can have this conversation, because what we're talking about is often kind of disregarded as, oh, it's because you're crazy. Oh, it's because you're messed up. You're broken. You're traumatized. There's something wrong with you. And actually, when I listen to you, I'm seeing someone who is hugely intelligent, you speak with so much authority in science, because I mean, you've studied it, you've researched it, you've qualified in it. So, you have the academic knowledge to back up what you're saying, but you also have this rare experience of people who are raised in environments that are not their roots. And this is something, because I was born in London and raised in the UK, and I've always had relationships with people who are from where I live, and there's never really any discussion about the impact that is had on individuals who grow up or are raised with a different culture, but live in a completely different culture. And so the idea of doors being guarded by people with a certain mentality that is not your own is such an important thing to highlight, because it really has such a significant impact on people's well-being.
Definitely.
And I hear in you someone who has so much light within them, so much to give to the world, but has been crushed by the environment you've grown up in.
Yeah, and that's why I said it was so important that each of us have that charismatic adult in our lives that can help us, because very early on, when I have all these turbulent thoughts and intense emotions in my head, there was nowhere to go except to write them down in a journal. And I kept so many diaries over the years, and they have come in useful now, because the way I write now is so emotive. I've written a column, and now I have a LinkedIn newsletter that some people say have made them cry, and I think it's from the early years practice of actually crying myself into my diary. And so having that, and also someone in your life to actually champion you. And very early on, I had that person, and there were several others after they see my determination. So when you start really creating this resource around you, I had to find them in books when I didn't have them, definitely not in my household. And I remember putting loads of motivational quotes in front of me on my wall, because I could not fail, because if I did fail, my life would never change. And so I knew very early on that I was going to leave, Malaysia at some point. I didn't know when, and I finally did at the age of 24. That was my first time on a plane. It's almost unthinkable to say that, because these days you have people traveling when they're babies. So first time on a plane at the age of 24, and cried my eyes out, arrived in the UK and had to adjust to a different culture completely, which took a lot of time. And so experiencing, that in nearly every place that I go to, I am the minority, but yet I don't feel that different from them in the mind. Because like you say, if you're intelligent, that you have so much thought and so much to give and so much in your head, right? And you don't feel lower than other people, you feel equal. But then you don't understand why, again and again, there are obstacles, especially when you're an entrepreneur. People don't necessarily say yes to you the first time or the second time or the third time. And then you wonder, what are they looking at? Because I look out and I always see the same type of people, because that's the rooms that, we are working with these days. And then I didn't realize that when they look at me, okay, they see someone who's in a minority. And with that comes some unconscious bias, right? You're Asian, why don't you come and work for me instead of creating your own things? The number of people who've asked me to work for them since I started my company is amazing. But I tried that. I went back to work and I decided that no, I can't. I have to do my own thing. I just have to accept that now. And so much more at peace with that when I realized that. And I told you before that I had to create doors for myself, and I'm doing it again. But I'm creating doors for myself now, and hopefully for more people, because I feel like I have a platform now to talk, and people are listening, and my audience are in the majority. So if I can, bring some of these stories in a way that people connect to it, because people won't connect to something unless they feel like it's speaking to them, about them. And that's why so much of what I do is about finding commonality between people. And then within the commonality, you help them see the differences. Because ultimately, right, when you say we're people of color, the original Neanderthal were colored, the dark skin. And just because we all went to different parts of the world to, put our roots down, and we, eventually developed different colors. But we were all from the same ancestors, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something earlier which was so powerful, which was, initially you saw yourself as different and therefore somehow unaffiliated, but then you realized there was so much power in your difference. And I think that is going to be the greatest take-home message from our conversation, is the fact that difference should be celebrated, because I see in you someone that's got so many interesting, unusual things to give to society, so much wisdom as a result of being different. And I wouldn't want you to hold back in giving that out. And so in you, I see someone who is different, and that's what makes you so special. And recognizing that in you gives me a chance of recognizing it in me. And we are different, as kind of people from different cultures. We are different, and that's not wrong. It's just different and beautiful. I'm also really curious to know your experiences in juggling the different aspects of being a woman, because a woman today is expected to not just have babies, but to do many other things. And it sounds like you are doing many other things. So how do you juggle all that?
I don't. I mean, I've got to admit that I am not very good at multitasking, despite thinking that I was. So very early on in my new parenthood, I had to give up full-time work in order to be a parent. And then I didn't really dare to have a second child until, it just felt like, okay, it's silly now not to have a friend for our oldest girl. So yeah, so there's an age difference between the both of them of 5 years. But then after that, as soon as my son was born, I just felt like, oh God, I can't take another 6 years off. Like I did freelance work, but not building my career, because the intensity that I have within me, I had to channel it to something. Otherwise I get depressed. There's so many explanations for that, whether it's an autistic special interest, or that I've just always needed to have a mission or something to hold on to. And I came across this book called Living with Intensity. That's so interesting. Like within it, there was a quote that I identified with, in that this woman, she was worried about how she would channel the same intensity that she has for her work, with also looking after her family and her children, because she doesn't know how to do both. And that is me. Since I started this company, my children have seen me in front of the computer, even late at night, more times than they care to count. And I asked my daughter to describe me with 5 words recently, and one of it was busy, and she said it with trepidation as well. Like she doesn't want to make me upset that I said, it's fine. It's okay for you to say that, yeah. So it is hard to juggle this, the role that we've been given, and it is only possible if you can get some help and support. And for me, like, I have a husband who doesn't mind taking a step back sometimes, and he said to me that it's your time now because you took that time off. But then he still does it with a bit of this disgruntled, because ultimately there's the role that society has placed on man and women. There's the expectations, and for men who actually take a step back to become full-time parent as well, they have to deal with some anxieties themselves, the image that they're giving out to society. And and to the neighbors. So it is not perfect, but we hopefully will get there. And I think one of the ways of doing that is to actually creating your own place so that you can have a say in your own hours, and like do things that interest you and lights you up, and I think for me now in this place is probably the most ideal situation that I can have for my, my situation, and having a coach that keeps me accountable as well for some well-being time and work-life balance, which I struggle so much with. But I literally have a calendar now where I, highlight the bit where I'm not going to work, I'm going to spend time with my children, and then the bit where I'm going to work, and it's going okay. But it's not perfect. So yeah, with problems, juggling this expectation of the role of women in society. That's the answer I have.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you found your own sort of balance, because it is about having boundaries and being manageable with those different roles. Because I don't have children, and when you talk about, I still need to find something that lights me up, I'm like, but why wouldn't children light you up? Because I just don't have that comprehension of what it's like to have children. And I just wish there was a great ideal that we can work towards, where women can have their children and have careers and apply themselves to something they're passionate about. If it's not children, I mean, just so many different women seem so different from each other, and I don't know what the golden solution is.
Yeah, it's all personal, isn't it? It's down to what you value, in your life. Is family, some like children, something you want, or is it like you finding your own way first, having that almost like a peace of mind that, okay, you're going to be okay, and then you have children. I didn't have that. I navigated parenthood, in kind of like the throes of like existential anxiety, and so that made me quite depressed for many years, and children do light you up. They're very cute when they're small, but they are also incredibly hard work. It's a sacrifice, and I wasn't fully prepared for it, and that's why I was a little bit like unsure about where I should be. But I love my children, but just having children alone wasn't enough for me. When you have this brain that's constantly thinking of things and new ideas and new things that you want to do, I like to have both, like have my cake and eat it, but there is always something that has to give.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I never had children, because when I was younger, I thought to myself, I can't possibly put all of what I'm doing to one side in order to be selfless for children. And so I never ended up having them. But once I started to find my stride with balancing all the different roles of my life, like I felt a bit more settled, I felt more focused, I felt more, I get to an age where, time has run out to have children. And so I think I will live in perpetual bafflement about how women are supposed to have it all without having what you experience, which is like the anxiety and the, oh my God, what am I doing? And how do I do this time? I just hope that we get to a point where we are supported. And it sounds like your husband is supportive. And I think that is probably the solution, is to actually support women in trying to have it all, because to do it in an unsupportive environment is pretty much impossible, and it leads to sort of like emotional and mental non-well-being.
No, you're completely right. Like I have friends who the husband prefers to just do all the career bit, and then the wife has to stay at home, and I can tell that she's so like unsatisfied, deep down, because she wants herself, the bit that's just her, to thrive as well. That bit has to wait, while she looks after 3 children. Yeah, that will all have different needs. So it's a sacrifice. I'm
Yeah.
yeah, unless you have childcare, and you don't mind, letting your nanny look after your child, but it's all personal choice, really.
Or the support of men. Like, honestly, like, it's not unmanly to be supportive of a woman. You know, I think it's extremely masculine to be supportive of women, and all the things they want to do. So yeah, just throwing that out there as a comment, because where else would you get to say that other than conversations like this? So we're running out of time, but I would love to hear your sort of solutions slash advice slash this is what I've learned from all my experiences so far as to how to be an empowered woman doing all the things that she wants to do in her life. Like, what do you think is the secret sauce to having it all, given what you've been through and with hindsight?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question, because anyone can do anything they want if they put their mind to it, right? And if the environment is right for you and you get the support. But ultimately, you got to do what you want, because we have one life, right? And I talked about, for me, I might be motivated differently to other people because I have an interest-based nervous system, and that I need to do things that make me feel alive. So we go down to, where do you visualize, yourself to be in your life? Some of us might want to be CEOs growing huge companies. Some of us might prefer to just be like a solopreneur, like a speaker or like an author, and that makes you happy. But some of us might, choose very different journeys where we have more project-based work. So ultimately, it's going to be different. But what do you value, in your life? And for me, it was creative freedom of expression, and recognizing that and identifying that, at the age of 40, that helped me own what I'm doing and stay on the path that is not going to deviate. So for me, I needed to know where I'm going, and that was like enough for me, just to know what my values are. So whatever opportunities I come across in life, as long as they align with my values, then it's okay. I will take them on.
Yeah, I think that is such an insightful piece of advice, because I completely agree with you. It's really important to have a clear idea of what you want in life and to be happy with what you've chosen, because with every choice comes a sort of sacrifice of something, and I would add to that, to not be afraid to surround yourself with people who encourage, support, and believe in you, because I totally relate to a lot of the experiences you've had, but it's so much easier when you're surrounded by people that get you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both you and I have had beginnings where we were kind of plunged into situations where we were around people that didn't get us. And in that environment, we've learned to find our own way. And so we get us, because I think from what I've heard of you, the problem was that we didn't understand ourselves, right?
Yes, exactly. And you're so right to say that you surround yourself with people who get you and is going to champion you and maybe sponsor you, because like the very reason you feel like you aren't understood, because maybe you're an outlier yourself, and you're looking in, seeing like how things could be improved. But then there are several other outliers amongst us that we're going to gravitate towards each other, right? And you're right. Like in a recent hurdle I called one of my oldest friend, and someone who's going to be unchanged by whatever I am in my life. He's still going to love me for who I am. And, he's always my center compass, and I can call him anytime. So yeah, having that person in your life is really important.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had a few of those. Like, you mentioned your biology teacher, people that I guess just provide unconditional love, for want of a more descriptive word. I mean, it's just people that accept us for who we are, and people that believe in us, maybe even before we learn to believe in ourselves.
Completely. Yeah, that is so important. It's good for the self-esteem for sure, especially when you're young, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Samantha, it's been so amazing to hear just a very thin slice of your experiences. I feel like we have hours and hours of chat to have one day if we ever get the opportunity, because there's so much to learn from each other's experiences and to kind of identify with. But for this short episode of Innovation and Esteemed, it's been amazing to hear your experiences. You've been so inspiring through your honesty, but also your knowledge of the fact that all of your experiences have been so important in forging a path in life. So thank you for sharing so much of yourself with us today.
Well, thank you so much for, being such a great interviewer. You really picked up the bits, that would be really relevant to your audience, and the bits that people would want to know more about. You're great, and also such an empowering person yourself. I'm just listening to you, and I just thought, you have everything that you need to, thrive. And if anyone's saying otherwise, it's usually for a reason. And just stick to your course, right? Listen to your own intuitions.
Yeah, well, it's because of conversations like this that have helped me find my own way, because I think, as with storytelling, finding common experiences can really uplift each other.
For sure.
So if anyone was to find out more about what you're doing and to learn more about your content, where would they go?
Yeah, so I am on all the social media channels, but if you want to find out more about me, go to my website called adhdgirls.co.uk. I'm also on LinkedIn as Samantha Hugh, and I have a company page called ADHD Girls as well. So come and look for me. I'm very fuchsia and black in my website and my branding, so you can't miss me. Fuchsia and black.